This is an RNZ podcast.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Your Money with me, Mary Holm. Thanks for taking just a few minutes to listen in while Jessie Mulligan and I talk through some useful ideas about how to make your money work better for you. Just remember though, this is guidance. Final decisions are up to you. Over to Jessie.
It's a rare chance for a Q&A on any topic with Mary Holm, our personal finance expert who joins me now from her home. Hi, Mary.
Hello, Jessie.
Thank you for offering this service to our listeners.
That's fine.
And we've got heaps of people getting in touch, hey?
Yes, we have. And a few of them have committed the mortal sin of sort of giving us too much information. And I think it's hard for people listening to sort of grasp the whole situation, so the sort of simpler, clearer cut questions are the ones that work better on radio, I think.
Yeah, and that's partly the success of your column is the fact that if one person is interested, there are probably 100,000 others listening who are in the same sort of situation, or might be one day.
Idea. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, well, let's go straight into it then. Too late to send your questions in now, guys, so just listen instead. We will do this another time in the future, but for now, Jane would like to know, well, she says she's going to be receiving $80,000 from bonus bonds. She wants to know if she should add it to her Kiwisaver account or buy an electric vehicle or maybe buy some shares. Three pretty different options. Well, Two pretty different options there at least, Mary.
Two of them are pretty different. So let's look at, Kiwisaver versus shares is the sort of simpler one first. And I would say for most people it's a good idea to put money into Kiwisaver rather than into separate shares if your goal is to maximise your retirement savings, because in Kiwisaver you're getting the diversification. Going for individual shares, the chances of you being able to pick particular shares that are going to do better than a Kiwisaver fund are fairly low. A lot of it comes down to luck. But if you enjoy investing in shares, and more people are enjoying that, doing it through some of the online platforms often, so they don't have to invest a whole lot of money. If you're enjoying doing that with your 80,000, Jane, well, I would say why not, as long as it's not a sort of key part of your total savings. Go for it and have a bit of fun picking out some shares. Buying an EV is a whole other, an electric vehicle is a whole other, that's spending instead of investing, but it might bring you a lot of happiness and feeling good about the world because you've gone ahead and made that big move that a lot of us are thinking next car is going to be an EV. And so look, it does so much depend on Jane's total financial situation, but if she's in a fairly strong situation and the car would bring her some pleasure and some fun, I would say go for that.
Great. I work 24 hours a week in one job, says Katie in Wairarapa, and 3 hours a week in a different job with a different employer. I'm in Kiwisaver with my main employer, and it didn't occur to me to join Kiwisaver with my second employer until I received a letter from IRD saying they noticed I wasn't contributing from my second job. Is it worth it? Should I be contributing from both?
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Katie seems to have fallen through the cracks here a bit because strictly speaking, at the beginning, if you're just joining Kiwisaver for the first time and you've got more than one job, you can say, I want the money to come out of one job only. But if you're already in Kiwisaver and you get a second job, then the money should be coming out of both paychecks kind of automatically. The employer should really ask you if you're in the scheme, and if you are, be taking the money out. Now, you can, if you want to, do a savings suspension on one job and not the other. So you can be in one and not the other, or contributing through one and not the other if you want to. But here's Katie, and the IRD has sort of caught up with, and I think that's probably what happens in the end. The IRD starts saying, hey, just a minute, this person's got PAYE taxes coming in from two different employers, but Kiwisaver from only one. What's going on here? So they've written to her. And I would say, Katie, look, even though it's probably a pretty small amount of money, you might as well be in Kiwisaver from both jobs because you'll get employer contributions on both of those sums then. You won't get more government money because you're probably already getting the maximum government money, but you will get employer money, and so that is almost doubling the money coming in from you.
Assuming her employer is paying that contribution,
making
right?
a contribution, well, they have to.
Okay.
Yeah, if she's making contributions, they have to. And
Okay.
if anyone out there whose employer is not, you should be reporting that to IRD because that should not be happening. So it's a way for Katie, we'll assume Katie's employer's on the up and up, it's a way for her to get, her money almost doubled. The reason why it's only almost doubled is the employer contributions are taxed and yours are not. So there's less coming in from the employer than there is from you. But nonetheless, it's sort of close to doubling the money going in, and that's a huge boost to your savings. So you might as well go for it.
Someone else asks, I'm soon to withdraw my Kiwisaver for a mortgage. The Kiwisaver is in balanced growth and rising very slowly. I know it's a risk, but is it worth changing into growth for 6 or 7 weeks before withdrawing the funds?
No, that's scary. Well, the answer to that is no, unless you really want to take a big risk. But I would say that when you're about to take money out for a mortgage, that's not the time to be risking that money. We saw last year what happened. People's Kiwisaver accounts dropped by about a third. And, that's awfully unlikely to happen again, but it might. And that wouldn't be terribly good right before you're about to buy a house. So, any money that you are planning to spend within the next 3 years, really, it's best to have it in a low-risk fund. And in fact, this person has got theirs in a balanced growth fund, he or she said. I would actually be saying move that down to the lowest risk fund your provider offers, and certainly not be moving up unless you're a real gambler, and you could find the whole house thing falls through. That would
be your advice to anyone planning to use their Kiwisaver in the next 5 years, is to move to a low risk fund, right?
Certainly within the next 3.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's sort of, between 3 and, say, 10 years, you might be in a sort of middle risk fund.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get to within about 3 years of spending it, move it into low risk, and then you know where you stand, whatever happens.
That's if you're going to spend all of it, like on a house. If you're about to turn 65, maybe it gets a bit more complicated, and we've done sessions on that.
Because you're not planning to spend all that in a lump sum. That's right. Just move the money you're thinking of spending within the next 3 years into the low risk.
My wife and I, we're in our mid-20s. We just bought our first home, says someone. We have a sizable mortgage and we're each contributing to Kiwisavers. My question is, what should we be doing with our additional savings, excluding our rainy day fund? Should we pay down the mortgage or make investments? Gee, Tom sounds like he's a good thinker here. He's asking the right questions and in a pretty good position.
Yeah, he is. He's doing well in the mid-20s. And let's applaud them for having a rainy day fund. That's the first thing to do with extra savings is to get some money there that will help you out if you lose your job or something else awful happens. So the paying down the mortgage versus making investments is, I've always said it's a good idea to pay down the mortgage because it gives you a very secure position if you can get to the point where you've got a low or no mortgage. These days, with mortgage interest rates so low, that question is a bit more debatable, and you and I have talked about that before, Jessie. So it depends a bit. And as a young couple here, they've got plenty of years to, if they do other investments rather than paying down their mortgage, they've got plenty of years to get past any market crashes in the meantime. So, if they're feeling they could take a bit of risk, they could put it into a higher risk non-Kiwisaver fund, so they've got access to the money if they want it sometime. And so it's in that higher risk fund as long as they promise themselves to stick with it when the markets go down, basically. Yeah.
Okay.
But if they prefer something a lot more secure, then there's nothing wrong ever with paying down the mortgage.
Talking to Mary Holm, who's taking listener questions on their financial situation. I'm 64, says Margaret. I'm self-employed and I plan to work for the next 5 years or so. I have around $600,000 invested with a finance company, and I live with my retired husband in a mortgage-free house. Is $600,000 enough to retire on, or would you advise I keep saving for the next few years while I can and am still enjoying what I do? Again, that sounds like a pretty good position to be in to my untrained eye, Mary.
Yes, she's certainly not in an awful position. One thing that flashed at me a little bit was she's got her $600,000 with a finance company. Just make sure you haven't been enticed by high interest rates into a company that's a little bit risky, Margaret. I'd just be checking that out, because we saw what happened to finance companies 10 years ago or so, where people lost a lot of money. So
this close to retirement, you may want to look for a lower risk investment.
Yes, she might. She might want to move that money into perhaps a Kiwisaver fund, or where it's very unlikely to sort of just disappear, whereas in a finance company it possibly could. But she is assuming that investment's all right. I think I would suggest she might want to move that money into a cash fund, a non-Kiwisaver cash fund. I've had a lot about that in my Herald column. She could go on my website and do a search for cash funds there and get information about that. But broadly,
It's another way of saying a low-risk fund, really, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a very low-risk fund. It's a cash fund, yes.
Maybe just slightly higher than putting it in the bank, or about the same?
That's right. You've got a chance of making a bit more than in a bank, not a lot, because basically the funds are investing in the sort of investments like bank term deposits, but they sometimes take on a little bit more risk and get a bit more return on them. But she now she's looking at, also wondering, she's got $600,000 and she's looking at whether that's enough to retire on. A very basic rule that's sort of right for people is, if you retire at 65 and with $600,000, you can spend about $600 a week until you die. That's how long that money's likely to last. And if you're retired with $200,000, you could spend $200 a week. It's a very rough rule, but it works pretty well. It depends a bit on how you invest the money in retirement, etc., but it gives people a rough idea. So she should be thinking about whether $600 a week over and above New Zealand Super would be enough for them to have a nice time, or whether she'd rather have a bit more if she continues working, because she says she's still enjoying what she's doing.
Yeah.
And so maybe she should keep working for a few more years, because don't forget, for every extra year you work, you can build your savings up, and you've also got fewer years of retirement to fund at the other end. So it's kind of like you get a double whammy out of every extra year you work at that point in life.
Thumbs up, Margaret.
Yeah.
Jo says she's retired and still has money in her Kiwisaver account, and she has a lot more in a term deposit, which will mature soon. She's thinking of adding that sum to her Kiwisaver and drawing some out quarterly to live on. Is that a good idea?
Yes, it can be. Kiwisaver can be really good for people in retirement. A great way for people to be using their money. And don't forget, these days, for storing your money until you spend it. Don't forget, these days, anyone at any age can join Kiwisaver. So if someone's listening and they're over 65 and they're not in Kiwisaver, they can join. They don't get the government money or compulsory employer contributions, but it's still quite a good place to be parking your money. I would say, what you want to do, and we referred to this a little bit before, is think about that money, the money you're likely to be spending the next 3 years, put it in a very low-risk Kiwisaver fund. But then if you've got something you're planning to spend from 3 to 10 years, put that in a Kiwisaver bond fund. And if it's longer-term money than that, money you're planning to be spending in your 80s and 90s perhaps, then if you're brave enough, put it into a higher-risk Kiwisaver fund, and it'll, as long as you let it stay there through thick and thin, you should end up with more money in the long run. There's quite a lot about this in my 2 books that are out there, because it's a lot for people to absorb just on the radio, there's
Yeah.
Rich Enough or A Richer You, have both got quite big sections on sort of how to organise your retirement money. So that might, I'm not just trying to sell my books, it's just that it's quite a lot for people to
Not at all,
grasp.
yeah.
In 2 minutes
Appreciate
on the
that.
radio. Sorry?
I appreciate that, yes.
Yeah.
Peter turns 65 next month. He says if he pays another $1,000 or $1,024 into his Kiwisaver account before then, will he get the full $512 government contribution, or is it pro rata?
It's now just a tiny little correction. It's not 1,024, it's 1,042. I'm not just being pedantic, but people might miss out on a bit.
Thank you.
It's pro rata, Peter. Sorry. So if you turn 65 in August, then when the end of the Kiwisaver year comes around next July or end of June, you'll get a government contribution that's proportionate to how much of that July to June year you were under 65. So in your case, it's not a lot if you're turning 65 in August. But look, then people sometimes get well, how much should I put in anyway? And I say, look, don't worry too much about it. Just put in roughly the amount you think you might work, plus a bit more, because you're going to get access to it as soon as you turn 65 anyway, and it's your money, and it's sitting there in Kiwisaver. It could be in a lot worse places in the meantime.
Hey, Mary, guess who got his $512 government contribution, even though he only transferred his money on the 30th of June at about 11:30 in the morning?
Well done, Jesse. You must have a good provider to account. And you just committed the same sin. You said 512. It's 521.
Sorry,
People, look. I'm not just being pedantic. People get very worried about these finer points sometimes.
Yeah,
well done, Jesse. And next time maybe you shouldn't push it so much.
Yeah, you say that every year, and I say, okay, I will. We have $400,000 invested in an ANZ term deposit. It's paying 0.95% per annum. We're both retired 75-year-olds and inexperienced investors. Could you please offer us your advice around a more fruitful investment? This is a great question. They name a couple of funds and ask for your thoughts on them, Fisher funds and Milford funds, and what portion of our investment would you suggest we place where and at what level of risk? From what we've heard, the above would be more beneficial to us than our present investment with term deposits. And there will be loads of people in this position, right?
Yes, there are. Although, interestingly enough, term deposit rates ASB's just raised its term deposit rates a little bit. And, the Reserve Bank's saying interest rates will be going up in the next, months, really. And so term deposit rates should start going up a bit too, but they're certainly not going to suddenly get a whole lot higher. So, yes, so retired people, the option is, now these people have suggested a couple of funds, which Fisher funds and Milford funds, that advertise a lot. There's nothing wrong with them, but their fees are not low, and so they won't like me saying this, but I think some of the other Kiwisaver providers offer just as good returns with lower fees, so and services, etc. So I wouldn't particularly recommend those two. But the question is really whether they should move into Kiwisaver funds of some sort. That's the obvious option for them. And I would say yes. Once again, you want to put the money that you're planning to spend within a short period of about, say, 3 years in the lowest risk Kiwisaver fund, and then the others, as we've just been talking about, fanning on up to the higher risk, if you've got the courage to do that. But if you haven't, then leave it all in the low risk one. It's probably going to earn you a little bit more than in a bank term deposit. It might be a little bit volatile. The balance might sometimes go down a little bit, but in the long run, you should earn, a slightly higher return on it.
Great. A couple of people wanting to point out, and I know you know this, but just to get you to clarify it really, that some employers don't pay Kiwisaver contributions because they do a bit of a tricky thing when they're negotiating your package that you sort of negotiate out of it. Does that ring a bell for you?
Yes, it's called total remuneration, and it's where they're basically saying they want to treat all their employees the same, whether they're in Kiwisaver or not, and so they effectively give everybody the same deal. And what it amounts to is that you're not better off in Kiwisaver than you are out of it, or not materially better off. It's quite complicated. There's not a lot people can do if that's what your employer does, and some of the bigger ones are more inclined to do it. The government got rid of it at one point. It was allowed, then it wasn't allowed, then it was allowed again. I would like to see it got rid of, although not everybody agrees with me about that. You're marginally better off in than out, I think, because for tax reasons, but and it's just in the long run better off to be in Kiwisaver. So yeah, don't abandon it, but pressure your bosses if you can to change that, because I don't think it's good. I think the argument that we want to treat our employees all the same whether they're in or out of Kiwisaver doesn't really wash, because Kiwisaver is meant to be a privilege, meant to be more attractive for people. Some people say, most people, a lot of lower income people can't afford Kiwisaver, but you could afford to be in there for 1 year at 3% and then go on a savings suspension and just perhaps put $10 a week in or something like that. There are ways for lower income people who are struggling to still be in Kiwisaver. So that's my 2 pennies worth on that one. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I just throw this one at you, Mary? I'm really interested in what you make of it. Margaret says, I'm 75 with a Kiwisaver balanced fund, and lately she says Kiwisaver has been urging her to move to a managed fund should she move in order to earn higher interest. What do you make of that?
So she's 75 in a balanced fund.
Yeah, and she says Kiwisaver, I guess that means her Kiwisaver provider has been urging her to move to a managed fund.
I don't know quite what she means by a managed fund, because that managed fund is a big all-encompassing word that includes all Kiwisaver funds and all non-Kiwisaver funds.
Yeah, maybe, Margaret, I'll ask you to, if you can send the correspondence to me and we'll take a look at it maybe off here and see if we can help you out.
Yeah, yes.
That was great fun, Mary. Thank you.
Yes, it was a pleasure, and perhaps we can do it again sometime, because we've got more than that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yes, okay.
Very good. Mary Holm, our personal finance expert, giving you advice on the questions that you've sent through over the last couple of days. And definitely later in the year, I'll give you a heads up and we'll give you the opportunity once again.